Good morning, everyone. We are learning Mishna Bikurim. We are beginning Perek Beis, Chapter 2, Mishna Aleph, Mishna 1. I dedicate this morning's learning memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamis plus Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. Truma Bikurim. Truma and Bikurim. That's the point of this Mishnah. We're comparing Truma and Bikurim. We're going to be listing things that Truma and Bikurim have in common with each other. And the reason they have these laws in common is because the Torah tells us certain laws by Truma, and being that Bikurim, the Torah refers to Bikurim as Truma. That means that Bikurim shares many of the same laws. Bikurim shares with Truma a number of laws. So here's the beginning. Here's how the Mishnah goes. Chayavim Truma Bikurim, Truma Bikurim, Chayavim Alehen Misa v'Chomish. One who eats them can be liable to a premature death at the hands of heaven for eating them, and for eating them you would pay a fifth. Now these are two separate cases. The case in which a person would be liable to a penalty of death by heaven would be in a situation where the person intentionally ate the Truma or the Bikurim, knowing that they were Truma Bikurim, knowing the severity of the prohibition, and they did it anyway. That is when a person would be liable to Misa, not a capital punishment, but a death by the hands of heaven, an early death because of what he did. The Chomesh is talking about where a person unknowingly eats Truma or Bikurim, where he didn't know it was Truma Bikurim, he didn't realize the prohibition. In those cases, a person has to pay the value of the Truma or the Bikurim, plus he adds a fifth. A fifth means he adds a quarter of the value, which is a fifth of the total value. And that is a penalty that is paid, that a non-Kohen for eating Truma or Bikurim pays for what he did. Now, in the case where the Truma or the Bikurim belong to a specific Kohen, the halacha is that you pay the principal to the Kohen who owned it, and that extra fifth can go to any Kohen. In a situation where the Truma or the Bikurim were eaten before they were given to a specific Kohen, so then again, the Keren, the principal, and the fifth go to whatever Kohen you choose. But that's what it means that one is liable for them, either Misa or Chomesh, depending on the situation. And of course, not talking about a Kohen, because the Kohen is the one who eats the Truma and who eats the Bikurim. And because, again, the Torah tells us these laws by Truma and Bikurim, we know the Torah refers to as Truma, so therefore these laws apply to Bikurim also. Va'asurim lezarim, and Truma and Bikurim are forbidden to non-Kohanim. Now this seems a little bit out of place because we just spoke about Misa, death, a penalty of death, a penalty of a chomesh of a fifth. So we already know that we're talking about that these things may not be eaten by people who aren't Kohanim. So what is the Mishnah adding when it says it's forbidden to zarim? A zar means someone who's not a Kohen. And the answer given by the commentary of the Baratunura is that what the Mishnah wants to mention is the fact that we know that in order to receive any punishment for eating Truma Bikurim, there's a certain volume, a minimum volume of them that you have to eat. It's called a kazai, is the size of an olive. That's the minimum amount that one would be liable any punishment or even any payment for Truma Bikurim. Nonetheless, if you eat even less than a kazai, even a minuscule amount, it's still forbidden. The Torah forbids a non-Kohen to eat any amount. Liability, punishment will only come if he eats the volume of an olive. But less than that is still forbidden. That's what it means of asurim lezarim. It's forbidden to the zarim, even in situations where there is no punishment because you ate less than a kazais, than the volume of an olive. Nonetheless, it's still forbidden to non-Kohanim. Even less than that, it's forbidden for non-Kohanim to eat. V'heim nechsei kohen. Truma and Bikurim are considered the property of the Kohen. That means that the Kohen can do with it, as long as he's not ruining it or damaging it or destroying it, a Kohen can do with the Truma and Bikurim what he wants. That means, let's say he wants to buy something from another Kohen, and he's going to barter. He's going to give that Kohen the Truma, and for that, he'll buy land, whatever it's going to be. He'll buy real estate with it. So we say that you're allowed to do that. They're what the truma they bikurim are the property of the Kohen. Of course, he has to treat them properly, but they're his to buy, to do with it what he wants. He wants to eat it, fine. He wants to use it as barter to buy something, that's fine. Now, next, they come up in 101. This is something we've spoken about a number of times, and that is that the law is that when you have two dry food items that become mixed up with each other, then the halacha is that if they are two of the same type, then according to the Torah law, they would become. Let me read it to you from here. It'll be clearer. Generally, if prohibited dry food becomes mixed with permitted dry food of the same type, for example, a piece of non-kosher meat becomes mixed with pieces of kosher meat, we cannot tell them apart. A simple majority of permitted food nullifies the minority of forbidden food, and all the pieces are permitted. In some cases, the mixture is not permitted unless the permitted food is 60 times larger than the forbidden food. Not getting into the details for that. But sometimes the majority is enough to nullify it. When the two things get mixed together, sometimes you need 60. However, the rabbis decreed that in a mixture of truma or bikurim and permitted food of the same type, mixture is not permitted unless there are at least 100 parts of permitted food for each part of truma. We've discussed this before. When you have min b'minoi, two of the same type of foods that mix together, and we're talking about dry foods. So in a case where it's, let's say, kosher, non-kosher, a majority is enough to nullify, to allow you to eat them both. But if we're talking about truma or bikurim, the sages instituted 100 times more. So that's what it means. Both truma and bikurim need the ratio of 100 to 1 in order to nullify that truma bikurim that got mixed up with other permissible fruits, produce, and you can't tell them apart. Utu'unim rechitzas yadayim v'herav shemesh. Tu'unim rechitzas, they need the washing of hands. That means that before a Kohen eats truma or bikurim, he has to wash his hands beforehand. The reason is because the sages decreed that one's hands are automatically considered tamei, impure. And they're at the level it's called shnias latuma, at a kind of second level of tuma. You have an ava tuma, the primary source. You've got the rishon, the first level that touches, it goes a level down, but we call it a rishon, a first. And it's the first level that goes, that let's say came into contact with the primary source. So it now goes down a level, but it's called a rishon, a first. And then if this rishon touches something else, that becomes a sheni, it becomes a second. That's a lower level. But again, it still has the power of impurity. The sages instituted, won't get into the reason, that a person's hands are considered shnias. That's the automatic status of a person's hands are that they're at the second level tuma. If those hands touch truma bikurim, they're gonna invalidate it. You can't eat it then. And therefore, what you need to do in order for a Kohen to be able to eat his truma and to eat his bikurim, he's got to wash his hands. Like we wash our hands before for hamotzi, a Kohen has to wash his hands for any truma that he's going to eat, because otherwise he's going to make it impure. Actually, the fact that we wash for hamotzi, we wash for bread, was the sages instituted because we want the Kohanim washing their hands for truma. Therefore, we instituted washing hands for bread to create this whole idea, to make this whole idea part of our culture of sorts. Of course, it's an obligation, but it's part of our practices. And this idea of washing for your meal, that's for the purpose of making sure the Kohanim are used to this idea of washing their hands before truma, and the same thing applies to bikurim. Then the Mishnah says, "V'harav shemesh," you need the setting of the sun, which means you need nightfall. And this we mean like this: if a Kohen, let's say, becomes impure, and his impurity lasts for a day, so once he goes to let's say he goes to the mikveh, so the mikveh has definitely decreased his impurity, but there's still a certain level, or called a trace of tumah, that's still there. Because of that, the Torah says that if a Kohen becomes impure for a day, and he went to the mikveh, which purifies him, nonetheless, he's got to wait for nightfall before he can eat truma. He has to wait for nightfall, even though he has immersed himself in the mikveh, And for that, he does attain a certain level of purity, but he's not completely pure. Therefore, we say that the Torah therefore said before he eats Truma, before he eats Bikurim, he's got to wait for nightfall. That's what means by Erev Shemesh. He needs the night. He needs nightfall. Harah Ela Truma Bikurim. Whatever we just listed apply by Truma and Bikurim. Masha Ain came by Meiser, but they do not apply by Meiser, the tithe, which really in this case means what we call Meiser Sheni. As we mentioned before, when you have new produce, you have to separate first for the Kohen, his Truma, then you separate Meiser, a tenth of what's left over for the Levi. That's called Meiser Rishon, the first tenth. Then there's Meiser Sheni, the second tenth. The second tenth of what's left over from the produce, you have actually has sanctity, and you have to take it to Yerushalayim and eat it there. If you can't bring the actual produce to Yerushalayim, redeem it on money, and the money has to be spent in Yerushalayim on food and drink. The Meiser Sheni has to be brought to Yerushalayim and eaten there in itself, or the money that it was redeemed upon. Now we're saying, the Mishna is saying at the end that whatever we just said until now does not apply to Meiser Sheni. That means for a person's even if you're not a Kohen, you're allowed to eat Meiser Sheni. So the whole point, the first three things about the possible penalty of death, and the fifth being forbidden to non-Kohanim, not applicable to Meiser Sheni because non-Kohanim can eat it. We do not say that the person who, now Meiser Sheni belongs to the person who, it's his produce. He's the one who deals with it. They are not considered his property. He cannot use that to buy something, use as a barter to buy something like a Kohen can use his Truma or Bikurim for. Meiser Sheni must be eaten in Yerushalayim, or you redeem it onto money. The produce has no more sanctity in Meiser Sheni, and the money has to be used for food in Yerushalayim. You can't use it for anything you want. At the same time, you don't have to wash your hands before Meiser Sheni. You don't have to, now, you have to wash your hands for Meiser Sheni, because Meiser Sheni will not become nullified, will not become impure through your hands that are a Sheni. Now, if you do actually become impure, not allowed to eat Meiser Sheni in a state of impurity. But once you go to the mikveh, then you can. You don't have to wait for nightfall to be able to eat your Meiser Sheni. Once you go to the mikveh, you're pure. You're considered pure enough for the purposes of eating Meiser Sheni. We continue with the laws of Rechilas, Klal Tes, chapter 9, in the Chavetz Chaim, Sif Gimel, paragraph 3. I'm going to give you another example, says the Chavetz Chaim, of something that's also not prohibited because as Rechilas. Kagoin, for instance, you heard someone say, if I meet up with so-and-so, in a certain place, I'm going to whack him. Or I'm going to shame him. I'm going to let him have it. Or you hear that a person has plans to monetarily hurt this person. It all depends on the following. Now again, you just heard something personally. You heard it straight out. You should go and protect this. You should protect this person. You should warn this person of what could be happening. So Toli Bazeh, he says, but that depends on the following. If let's say you know that this person's done this to other people, or you recognize based on the situation at hand that he's not exaggerating. He's not just, talking big. He's going to do it. You need to go reveal this to the person that he wants to hurt. Perhaps he'll be able to watch himself from him. He'll be able to be careful from this person, so that he doesn't get any kind of embarrassment or damage from the person. You still need to remember to keep in mind to fulfill the 5 conditions that we just said before. which quickly were that you have to, again, be sure this is happening, which you already covered. Don't overdo it. Don't exaggerate. Don't make it more than it is. Your intention should be to help the person, not to get back to the other person, and to know that this person will believe you, meaning there'll be some purpose in what you're saying. If you can prevent this in another way, you should, without having to tell this person about what this person wants to do to him. And just to make sure that, again, all that's going to happen from telling this person the information is that he's going to protect himself. Not that if you tell this person, oh, he's going to whack you, he's going to say, oh, yeah, I'm going to meet up with him and I'm going to whack him back. Or I'm going to go, or before he comes to me, I'm going to go after him. You have to make sure that things don't get out of hand and the wrong things happen. But if all that's going to happen is to make sure that this person protects himself, then it's going to be okay. Now, in the footnote, the Chavetz Chaim adds the following, and this falls into the category, or this would cover the condition we said before, that if you can avoid telling this person about what this person wants to do to him, but you can get him to protect himself otherwise, or you can get the result of him not being harmed otherwise, you should do that. So the Chavetz Chaim says, you heard this person say he wants to hurt that. He's going to hurt that person. Now you want to reveal to the other person, so he should protect himself. This is only if you rebuked that person who you heard is planning on hurting someone else, and he didn't accept your rebuke. Or you size up the situation and you know the rebuke's not going to help. But if you don't know otherwise, you should speak to him and rebuke him that he shouldn't go harming someone else. You should either rebuke him to tell him that what you're doing is wrong, or calm him down in some way. By that, his anger will go away. And if you can just calm him down to get him not to do it, or to rebuke him not to do it, you've accomplished the fact that now you don't need to tell the other person about what this person's plans were. You also fulfill the mitzvah of rebuke and bringing peace between people. Therefore, before you're going to go ahead and reveal to this person someone else's plans to harm him, that's only going to be if you first rebuke this. But again, the case is here, you heard the person's plans from him. So if you rebuke him, or you try and he doesn't listen, try to calm him down, he doesn't calm down, or you size the situation that whatever you're going to do is not try to say to him is not going to help, then you can go ahead and tell the person about how someone wants to harm him in order for that person to protect himself. Have a wonderful day.